The March to Ashen Vale. The March to Ashen Vale. The sound came first, the waterfall's endless roar, distant but insistent, like the heartbeat of the land they sought to secure. Rhain Dusk, a youthful teen with auburn hair and freckles on his face, the son of Lord Corvin Dusk, rode at the head of his father's middle column. Mist rose from the valley ahead, pale against the grey morning, and through it the trunks of ash trees leaned over the path as though listening to the army's approach. Lord Corvin was older, but didn't look it. He was in good shape and very much the Lord of the Dusklands in every aspect. His stoic personality was matched his solemn, trustworthy spirit. Dark brown hair with hints of graying, and a way about him that inspired loyalty and trust amongst his bannermen. Rhain guessed just under 5,000 in his company. Leading the formation was the Lord Tyvan Marshguard and his 70 silent spears. The spears angled banners dark with dew from the morning mists. Their charge was always the vanguard, as they were trained for. Tyvan was his father's trusted squire for years, and now, as a grown man in his 20s, he led the front of the entire Nightfall Legion. Every footstep stirred the smell of mud, iron, and herb smoke. The spears wore the finest, gilded crimson heavy plate, with the sigil of House Marshguard waving ahead. Pointed spears crossed, piercing the morning sun, one of Rhain's favorite banners in all of Emberfall. His own obsidian black breastplate plate was crested with House Dusk, was a blood-red sun, eclipsed by a black, ominous moon. As he rode his horse, Vesper, who also had a unique black plate armor set, to match Rhain's and his father's horse as well. The horses strutted in step with each other at a confident pace. In the middle of the formation, roughly 2,000 grunts, as they liked to be called, infantry men-at-arms wore dark, blood-trimmed chainmail with half-helms and matching tabards matching that of their liege lord. In the middle column rode just under 500 men of House Varyn and their lesser houses. House Varyn and Lord Garin Varyn once stood as rivals to House Dusk, ruling the eastern cliffs before the Ash Concord. When the last Lord Varyn's son was mortally wounded in a separate, much less political border dispute, it was a younger Lord Corvin Dusk himself who carried the boy from the field and saved him with fire magic forbidden by the Emberfall priests. Bound by debt and awe, House Varyn willingly bent the knee, swearing an unbreakable iron oath. Now they serve as House Dusk's enforcers and oathkeepers, ensuring no vassal ever breaks fealty again. They are feared for their silence and the iron masks their captains wear into battle. Garin was a fat, strong man with kind eyes, wielding a long sword and buckler on his back. His full helm opened up larger than most, and he smiled every time he spoke to Rhain. Rhain didn't know what kind of warrior he was. House Varyn had been in fewer conflicts than most. House Varyn's sigil bore a silver gauntlet gripping a broken sword on a field of black and violet. Their home, Greystand Hold, is where Rhain's father gathered his soldiers for the campaign only a few days prior. The southern city along the River Rhain was the perfect place to prepare in secret. No house was known more for their discretion, loyalty, and subtlety as House Varyn. Most of their soldiers used glaives and barbed halberds, designed for both reach and cruelty. Their smiths temper iron in cold water mixed with ash, producing blackened steel that doesn't gleam in moonlight. Ah, have you lads ever seen such a beautiful morning? Lord Stephen Thalen took a big smoke of his long pipe, talking to no one in particular. They had been riding since dawn, and Lord Thalen liked to make conversation. It's clear to me good Lord blesses us in our holy conquest. House Thalen was a very pious house, devoted to keeping the Lord's customs and devoting themselves to very chivalrous bladesmanship. Often the winner of the northern tournaments, House Thalen had a reputation for showmanship and class. The son of Lord Stephen was Timothy, barely older than Rhain, more stoic than his father, and possibly the best swordsman in the company. Saying Timothy Thalen was strong with a blade was an understatement. He was a bull. He would push his blade on his opponent so hard that if his adversary didn't lose their grip, they often cut themselves just trying to match his intensity. He was also graceful and confident, always ready to take on a challenge. The Thalens were once Smith Lords of a fallen Emberfall dynasty. When rebellion burned their forges, House Dusk restored them on condition of eternal service. They are masters of flame-forged weaponry and armored infantry, producing the ember steel that equips Duskland Knights. Their soldiers wield heavier swords and wear chainmail reinforced with blackened copper. House Thalen holds no political ambition. Their faith in the god of creation and Emberfall itself runs deeper than any house. They view House Dusk as divinely chosen to rule through shadow to preserve the flame. Finally, taking the rear guard was the smaller but ever resourceful House Careth. Their liege was Lady Alessandra Careth, who due to her womanhood did not join the campaign, but through her own mysterious powers always had ways of contributing to such campaigns. House Careth lived in the city of Nightfall with House Dusk. They serve as the primary source of information and influence upon the Dusklands. Arguably Lord Dusk's favorite house, he always seems to make use of their skill in intelligence and information. House Careth was spread out in the formation, a cadre of rangers, scouts, and rogues. Their numbers were unknown, and they always seemed to be shifting to and from. Every time Rhain inspected the company, he saw a different number of dark green Careth men. Once in a while, as he rode Vesper past trees, he'd see a dark green cloaked Careth man with their subtle sigilled tabard featuring the black eyes of Careth scurry out of the bushes or tree line. It often triggered a few seconds of panic and had Rhain reach for the crossbow in hooked to Vesper's saddle. But before he could even realize it was Careshmen, they'd vanish out of sight. Lord Coven always knew they were not a threat to him. Leading House Careth into battle, and the primary voice of House Careth was a man simply named Drath. Drath was pale-faced and only spoke when spoken to. He was a ranger clearly who used looks and hand signals and possibly other unknown means of communicating with his soldiers that was foreign to Rhain. House Careth was mysterious. Their presence was always interesting to Rhain and his men. Their used composite swamp bows were strapped to their dark green hooded attire. They dressed light, with leather armor under their jerkins and hoods that deeply covered their faces, yet they always seemed to know where they were going. They all had different weaponry, but most of the Carethmen had daggers, dirks, knuckled blades, throwing knives, and many other unique weapons, all subtly compartmented in their uniforms. They were also known for poison. If one was fortunate enough to defeat one of the Careth Rangers in battle, they would soon find a slow, agonizing death in the days to come. For 3 days, the company had strutted to their borderland, through fields gone to rot and farmhouses abandoned. They left Nightfall Keep in a hurry once Lord Dusk heard of the murder and dispute amongst the small folk. As they were riding, Rhain had watched peasants vanish into woods at the sight of their crimson cloaks. As much as his father hated to bring bloodshed to this mostly peaceful and rural region of his homeland, House Orion had gone too far, declaring that the Ashen Vale was Orion land now, and even settling peasants near Zenith Falls and crossing our bridge without leave was asking for war. Lord Corvin, his father, rode a few paces ahead. He had not spoken since dawn. When he did, his voice carried like the toll of iron. "We reach the Vale by midday," he said. "Alaric will come." No one replied. The captains nodded as they already knew what was to come. House Dusk was nothing, if not prepared. Rhain had grown up beneath stories of honor. Duels fought for pride, banners saluted before the charge, but nothing in those tales prepared him for the silence of men anticipating a true battle. He looked down the ranks and saw faces pale with sleeplessness, mail shirts patched and stained. The youngest were barely older than he had been when he first took a sword. Some clutched talismans, bits of bone or twine, tokens against fear. He wondered if they would still be there when night fell. Rhain had never been in a real battle. He and his friends, Titus Halvric and Laramie Vane, had defeated some troublemaking bandits outside of Two Lights Rest a few months prior. One of the bandits ended up dying by Rhain's hand. The rest were detained and imprisoned. Rhain had never felt so powerful and in control than when he took the life of that drunkard bandits who would have raped a tavern wench had Rhain and his crew not been there. His friends stood behind him now, no doubt ready to prove themselves to the more seasoned soldiers in the company. "A battle such as this no place for a boy," said Father Oren to Rhain when he suggested he'd be going with his father on this noble conquest. "I am going, and no one is going to stop me," Rhain replied to the old man and his sobbing mother. Lady Dusk was outraged that Lord Corvin called the banners over what she endlessly described as peasant hearsay, and even more upset when Lord Corvin and Lord Orion agreed to. The Pyrrhic Pact, a sacred duel between two houses, liege lord the winner of which would claim victory and the losing side would withdraw with honor. What choice did his father have? Allow Lord Orion to continue encroaching upon our land, ours? What belongs to House Dusk will not be lost in this generation, not while Rhain lived. By noon, the trees thinned and the world opened. The Vale of Ashen Water spread before them, a deep green cleft cut by a river of glass. The waterfall plunged from the cliffs like a spill of molten silver, throwing up clouds of mist that turned the air to rain. The sound filled everything as they approached. On the far bank, across the narrow bridge of stone, the banners of House Orion snapped in the wind, white and silver, a roaring flame on their banners. Ranks upon ranks of spearmen stood behind them, their armor gleaming wetly in the light. Rhain looked at them with disgust, then drew a breath that tasted of iron and moss. The valley was beautiful, terrible, holy. He could feel the presence of the divine. His father dismounted and turned to his son. "This place belonged to our grandsires," Corvin said, "before Tybalt's crown, before these painted banners divided us. Remember that. House Dusk will always rule the Vale of Ash." Rhain nodded. "I will remember." "Do you fear them?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "Good. Fear comes later, when a man has something left to lose." Corvin's eyes softened for a heartbeat, then hardened again. He called for the heralds. Trumpets rolled across the vale to announce the arrival of Lord Corvin Dusk. From the opposite side, a matching call answered. Between the armies, the bridge waited, slender, ancient stone, slick with spray. There, beneath the waterfall's shadow, the two lords would meet according to the old custom of Emberfall, words before blades. Rhain watched his father cross the bridge with only 2 guards. Lord Alaric of House Orion came to meet him, clad in bright plate, chased with silver. His hair, once gold, was streaked with grey. His eyes were clear as river ice. The murmur of their voices was lost in the roar of water, but Rhain could read their stance. The stiff pride, the anger barely leashed on both sides. When the talk ended, Alaric raised his hand and cast a single coin into the water below. It flashed once and vanished. The meaning was plain. The price of peace had been offered and refused. Corvin bowed his head. Then both men turned and walked back to their lines. Twilight came early in the valley. Clouds gathered over the cliffs, turning the mist to a bruised violet. The 2 hosts lit torches that glimmered like twin constellations. Across the water, the men of Vale began to beat their shields, a slow rhythm that echoed against the rocks. The sound crept under the skin. Rhain moved among his father's ranks, offering what words he could. Hold fast and remember the evening fall, and this water is ours. He felt their fear as his own. Corvin summoned him before the standard. The Lord of Dusk's voice was calm, almost weary. "They'll come at dawn," he said. "But first, Alaric will challenge. He must. The custom demands it." Rhain swallowed. "And you'll answer? Would you have me crawl to Tybalt again?" "Number. The Vale is ours, or it is no one's. I will do what I must do." He rested a gauntleted hand on Rhain's shoulder. "I will defeat Lord Orion, and we will go home. Then we will spend summer erecting a garrison at the base of the Zenith Bank." Rhain tried to answer, but the words stuck. His father was already turning away, his cloak dark against the firelight. His anxiety was overwhelming. As he galloped behind his father, who hadn't stopped answering questions from his bannerman while he mounted his horse, he noticed men beginning to set up camp. Large tents and fires were being constructed, and the men began loosening their gear and finding rocks and tree stumps to congregate. For many of them, this was just another day. They cared not for High Lord's quarrels, but being out in the sun, commissioned with their fellow brothers, unified by a strong hatred for their Orion counterparts, was something that kept their morale high. "Rhain, come drink with us," Titus suggested as he pulled out a bottle of rum from the supply wagon. Titus took a large swig and handed it to Rhain. "No thanks. I want to keep my wits." "Suit yourself," Laramie Vane said as he took the bottle out of Titus's hand and took an even larger swig. Night settled heavy. The campfires of House Dusk ringed the Vale like stars fallen to earth. Rhain sat with Titus, Laramie, and his closest men, Gerard Pennybrook, old Mara the Healer, a handful of squires who whispered prayers into their cups. The waterfall never ceased. It was the pulse of the world, relentless. "Do you think we will actually fight? Or how does this pact work?" Titus asked the older soldiers as they gathered around the campfire. Gerard stared into the flames. "No, boy. The pact is very clear. When Lord Orion is slain, those silver, slimy, stinking buggers must go home. Dalen even says so." "Dalen? What does he know? Always praising the Maker and telling us about humility. Why is he even here?" "This is a place for a warrior, not some scroll reader," Titus said with a smile and laugh, looking to see if anyone else found his japes amusing. They did not. Gerard looked at the boy with impatience. The Maker and his Solari watch over conflicts such as these, and there are rules to war. Rhain said, "If the Solari do watch, they've turned their faces. Where were the Solari when the Aryan scum was stealing our trinkets and murdering our peasants. Gerard looked taken aback. He wasn't going to challenge the heir to the Dusklands on his understanding of the afterlife. Gerard, though he was a great soldier, according to Lord Corvin, had a small family and was from a lesser house whose name was unknown to Rhain. Mara the healer began her ceremonial prayer to bless the men as the fire peaked. The day dies beneath the horizon's edge, and the last breath of light scatters across the world like falling embers. We have walked through labor and sorrow, through mercy and error, and now the sky darkens to receive what remains of us. O Keeper of the Flame, hear your servant in the hush of twilight. I lay before you the dust of my deeds, the warmth of my hands, and the ache of all I could not mend. Burn away the stain of pride. Temper the steel of my spirit in the quiet of your fire. As night rises, let your gaze not fade. Watch over those who bleed, those who wander, those whose hearts are still aflame with grief. Let their pain cool as the hearth cools, yet leave a spark within them, that they may rise with dawn renewed. Bless this house and all within it, the sleepers, the wounded, the penitent, the lost. Let our dreams fall like sparks into your keeping, that no shadow claim them. The light wanes, but faith endures. The flame dims, but is not gone. The hand of the divine rests upon the ashes, and from them life shall rise again. So ends the day, and so begins the watch of God. In fire we are made pure. In darkness we are made whole. A gust carried the smell of rain. Thunder muttered somewhere beyond the cliffs. In that moment, Rhain felt the weight of the valley pressing down, the generations buried in its soil, the ghosts of those who had fought over the same water long before either house had a name. He rose and walked to the edge of camp. From here, he could see the bridge glimmer faintly in torchlight, and beyond it, the flicker of the enemy's fires. The mist blurred them together until the two armies seemed one. The night seemed to end in a blink of an eye. Rhain found himself waking up every hour until dawn. The morning crept pale and cold. Rain fell in thin threads, veiling the veil. Trumpets called again, not for parley this time, but for judgment. Father Dalen, Lord Garin, Lord Thalon, and Drath rode behind Lord Corvin in an angular manner, taking up most of the wide cobblestone bridge. Rhain sat on Vesper patiently as he was instructed next to Timothy Thalon, Lord Marshguard, Laramie, and Titus. Opposite of the Duskguard, Lord Alaric and 5 of his officers also rode across the bridge to meet Lord Corvin. Lord Alaric's armor was far more gilded and shining than his officers. His crest was a bright dawn. His plate mail must have been made of mostly silver. His gold trim and ridged golden and silver helm made him look to Rhain like some want-to-be king. Rhain could see in the distance a youth wearing a similar but more modest attire, a younger man, almost a boy, who was most certainly the same or a lesser age than Rhain. That must be Lord Alaric's heir, Rhain pondered himself. Corvin alone, dismounted, smiled at Lord Alaric in a grim fashion. He then placed his hand on his ruby-crested, leather-gripped hilt and pulled the black steel sword bare. The roar of Zenith Falls seemed to intensify, almost as if to bow before the great legendary Lord of Dusk. Lord Alaric rode out from his line, his blade bright and white like lightning. The Pyre Pact of Emberfall demanded that the dispute be decided by duel, and both armies waited, silent, as their lords took the field between them. Alaric Vale, older, broader, with the weathered look of a man who had seen too many winters and refused to yield to any of them. Blonde grey hair, grey beard, and a white cloak that he took off after dismounting from his beautiful steel-armored white horse. Lord Vale withdrew his legendary solstice, an ancient sword of Emberfall legend that had existed for many generations, and origins were mostly unknown to Rhain. His gauntlet found the hilt, and the world seemed to narrow to that single moment, the quiet meeting of man and legend. The leather grip of Solstice was warm beneath his palm, as if the blade remembered him. A whisper of light escaped even before the steel left its scabbard, a pale, trembling radiance that breathed through the seams of his armor. Then, with a slow and reverent motion, Alaric drew. The sound was unlike any other blade, not the harsh scrape of metal on metal, but a long, resonant chord, soft as the breaking of dawn. The blade slid free in a smooth arc, and with it came light, living, fluid light that rippled along its surface like molten silver. The white steel glowed faintly, its edge flawless, its fuller lined with veins of gold that pulsed gently, as if the sword possessed a heartbeat of its own. Along the crossguard, twin wings unfurled, elegant curves of polished dawn metal catching the dim sky, scattering it into shards of brilliance. At the hilt's end, the sunstone pommel stirred to life. A low hum filled the air, deep and pure, and from within, the orb rose a soft glow. Not fire, not flame, but the quiet promise of morning. Rhain gripped the haft of his own sword hilt so tightly, his knuckles ached. Around him, thousands held their breath. The morning intermittent rain picked up and hissed against armor, against banners, against the endless river. And between them, on the stone bridge that spanned the narrowest cut of the river, stood Father Dalen. The priest's robe was grey, the hem darkened by spray. He held the sigil staff of Emberfall, a wooden shaft topped by a small iron flame, and when he raised it, even the soldiers fell still. His voice carried above the noise of the water, thin but clear, as though the veil itself lent him breath. "Men of House Dusk, men of House Vale," Dalen said, "by the laws of Emberfall, which are older than the crowns of men, this field shall be consecrated to single combat. Let no blade cross save those of the lords who claim this ground. Let no blood be spilled beyond what the gods demand for justice." He turned, first to Alaric, then to Corvin. "The victor of this duel shall claim the Vale of Ashen Water, Zenith Falls, its stream, and all lands fed by its water. The vanquished shall yield, and his men shall lay down arms. So it has been written since the age of the first Emberfall, recorded in time." Both lords agreed. Rhain could feel the tension rolling like thunder through the ranks behind him. The air tasted of iron and rain. His father looked back once, only once, and Rhain thought he saw a flicker of something in his eyes: pride, love, resignation. Then Lord Corvin lowered his visor. The clash began with a sudden, sharp ring as blades met. Corvin and Alaric moved with a grace born of years of combat, each strike a blend of skill and fierce determination. The bridge beneath them, slick with the morning mist, became their stage of fate. Rhain watched, heart pounding, every movement etched into his memory. As the duel unfolded, the beauty of the Vale seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the grim reality of the battle. Rhain felt every blow as if it was struck against his own soul. Every parry a desperate attempt to hold back the tide of loss. Lord Alaric was loud as he swung Solstice up and down, and Lord Corvin countered his every attempt and pushed the tip of Solstice into the ground, giving a cold, powerful black steel elbow into Lord Alaric's visor, then knocked him back. Lord Alaric regained himself and pointed Solstice at Lord Dusk, matching his steps, shuffling, knees bent, toward his opponent. Lord Corvin lunged forward, pressing the attack, slashing and swinging, slicing Alaric's arm through the chains exposed that held together his plate mail. Lord Alaric, clearly wounded, seemed to gain even more composure. Rhain nervously shook his head. That should slow him down, Rhain thought. Blood seeped and continued to stain the pretty white steel of Lord Alaric's armor. He swung, and swords clashed together, harder and faster, each man exhausting every technique they knew, giving a masterclass of bladesmanship. Lord Corvin lunged up to Alaric, swinging wildly, his black steel coming within an inch of Alaric's helm. But Alaric swung his body back and spun, refocusing Solstice, blood still leaking from his right arm. Grunting, Alaric pressed the attack. Corvin caught Solstice with his blade, but Alaric was powerful. He pushed forward, knocking Corvin to the ground, dropping his sword. Rhain held his breath. Corvin then tackled Lord Alaric, punching him in the face, ruthlessly, containing his sword hand. As Alaric used his other hand to block the blows, he rolled off and kicked Corvin back, which gave the older lord time to recover his blade. Both men were sweating profusely and heaving to catch their breath. The sword dance continued, as the blades and footwork were as disciplined as the two lords themselves, Alaric slashing right as Corvin caught and countered, only for Alaric to parry and pivot. Corvin then slashed high, caught Alaric, a deep cut right under his neck, breaking the neck guard that latched to his breastplate, knocking it onto the wet stone. As Alaric began bleeding from multiple wounds, Corvin pressed again, and this time, Lord Alaric painfully swung Solstice right on target, slicing the great Lord of Dawn's head clear off his body. Rhain's mind went blank. Time stood still. The world was dark, and his mind was a hurricane. The young lord's scream echoed across the vale, a sound of pure anguish and rage. And in that instant, the battle shifted, the rules forgotten, as Rhain transformed from a grieving son into a force of vengeance. His white-hot rage was now the only thing he could feel. Rhain donned his helmet and swooped his legs onto Vesper, kicking the horse hard and demanding his fastest pace. Lord Alaric was on his knees, holding his collar as blood seeped through his plate gauntlets. His officers went to his aid immediately, rushing him behind his columns and eventually into his tent. Confusion overwhelmed both sides at first, as Father Dalen shouted, "God has decided a victor! House Vale!" As the priest saw the young lordling and his host charging into battle, he pleaded with the Dusk Guard officers, "Contain the Lord of Dusk. Rhain, no, stop this. You must uphold the custom." Drath simply smiled, looked at his new liege lord galloping towards him and the other officers, drew his bow and began taking out the officers trying to escape with Lord Alaric. "Are you mad?" Father Dalen asked him. "God has made his justice." Conflicted and shaking, Lord Thalen clearly was having trouble deciding whether or not to follow the words of the priest or give in to Rhain's reckless attack. But soon, confusion was resolved as he saw Lord Tyvan and his 70 spears could be seen galloping a few dozen paces behind Rhain. Lord Stephen Thalen then drew his sword, looked at the priest apologetically, and prepared for battle. Lord Garin looked all around, unfastened his battle axe, lowered his visor, and hesitated. The Dawn Guard was completely discombobulated. Lord Alaric's son rushed to his father's aid. The officers were dodging arrow fodder from not only Drath, but also the Kareth Rangers, who began volleying all around the Vale formation. Then, Rhain jumped off Vesper as the spears galloped past him. He grabbed his father's black steel sword, Dual-wielding his blades, he charged past the priest, who was attempting to dodge arrows and escaping through all of the horse, nearly being trampled multiple times. Rhain saw his death's helm and skull separated from his body, and tears poured from his eyes. He sprinted. The spears took the Dawn Guard completely off guard. As they were rushing to prepare and give commands, the Valormen had not been anticipating a fight. As Lord Alaric won the duel, the custom dictated the battle wouldn't take place, and half of soldiers expected the fight to be contained by God or the priest or someone, but that was not the case. Lord Tyvan ploughed through the enemy, penetrating deep into the ranks and forming a gauntlet of spears separating the Dawn Guard soldiers from each other. And the battle was truly underway. Arrows flew from both ends of the bridge, making it a hellstorm for everyone. Rhain was carving his opponents apart, one by one, with ease. As 3 Dawn Guard soldiers in white steel approached him, he disarmed one of them with a hard slash, while jamming one of his hilt into the other's neck. He used both sword to cut off the spearman's point, and then slashed at the disarmed Solida head, cutting through his helm and slashing apart his face, surely killing him. The final one tried to swing a battle axe, but whiffed, and Rhain chopped his arm off with one sword and stabbed him in the throat with the other. Arrows continued to fall all around them, but none of them would pierce Rhain as he continued to press the attack. He kept killing until he reached the tent of Lord Alaric. He saw Lord Alaric's son hiding behind the 2 surviving officers who accompanied Lord Alaric in the duel. "You are damned to hell, boy," one of the officers told Rhain. Rhain pointed his father's ruby-hilted black steel sword at him and kept his other sword high in a balanced fighting pose. The other officer came at him with a buckler and a sword, Rhain chopping his sword hand right off immediately, and the man persisted with a buckler shiver into Rhain's face. Rhain's rage could not be denied as the other officer tried to swing at him. He spun away from the blow and hurled towards the officer who damned him. Too easily, he decapitated him, and the disarmed officer ran away, trying to contain his blood. "Please stop this. My father is dying. He won the duel. You don't have to do this. We can find a way to work this out. I am sorry he killed your father, but it was the custom, the Pyre Pact. Have you no honor?" The young lord, who Rhain presumed to be Alaric's son, pleaded, "No, I do not. Your father and you sick bastards took it from me. This is our land." Rhain killed the boy in front of his dying father, who just sobbed. Rhain slit Alaric's throat as the medics and priests ran from the tent. Rhain then dropped the sword in his left hand and picked up Solstice. The fighting continued, but soon the men of the Vale were all but completely wiped out. Many fled back once they realized the battle was thrown. Only a few were able to escape as the Kareth scouts hunted them down in the woods. At dusk, the fighting was through, and well over half of his men had fallen. As Rhain walked through the aftermath, he saw the bodies of Father Dylan, who had been struck by an arrow trying to escape, Lord Stephen Thalen, who was thrown over the bridge, and many more faces he knew well. Rhain was inconsolable after losing his father. His men understood. Everyone but Timothy Thalen, who seemed to disappear after the first night. Once the burials were finished and the bodies of his enemies were burned, the company, now less than 2,000 strong, mounted up. "What are your orders, Lord Dusk?" Tyvan asked as he rode alongside Rhain. "We will return back to Nightfall Keep, re-cooperate, and then we will build a garrison in the Ashen Vale.